So the goal of today was to look at if you're using pdfToolbox and you want to do imposition-based work, you should be using the JavaScript imposition-based stuff, obviously, because that is the most modern way of doing it. And then we all know that LLMs or AIs, however you want to call it, are quite good at doing JavaScript-based work now. So how can you use an AI engine to avoid work for you and have the AI engine write the configuration for you? That is the main question we want to answer. And then some of you may have already experienced how that works or have experimented with how that works, in which case, great. And if you have additions to what I'm saying, please feel free to add. I've been trying to use this for quite a while. And for quite a while, it didn't work very well. I think that was due to two things. The AIs were not clever enough, and I was not clever enough. That's usually how it works. And the AIs got better, and I got older. And I don't know whether that's the same as smarter, but it goes in the same direction anyway. So I think I now have a setup that is reasonably good to very good at what it's doing. And actually, some of the functionality in pdfToolbox 17, some of the things that use imposition or use the imposition engine to accomplish their task, there was actually some AI-assisted development for the imposition configurations going on. So at least that part worked. And what I'm going to do today is show you how it worked, how I set it up. And I'm also going to tell you all of the things I tried that didn't work and the stupid stuff that happened while doing so. And actually, I had to change what I'm saying today because when I tried this morning to rehearse what I was going to show you, I found out that some things had changed in the meantime and not everything worked the way it used to work before, which is very interesting. So, how do we do this? Well, first of all, what I'm doing here is I'm using Claude for the demonstration. I don't know whether this demonstration is going to work. As I said, things have changed in my Claude setup since the last time I did this. And so we may experience some interesting things there. We will see. But at least I want to show you what the overall setup is that that you can use to do this. So I have Claude here. I have tried this approach in two AI engines, and ChatGPT, which is my main engine that I use for everything. And then I've also tried it in Claude. I've tried a bunch of others, and I either couldn't get them to work, or they had some restrictions that made it impossible to do what I wanted. And so in the end, I'm pretty sure that ChatGPT and Claude can do this. I'm not so sure about other models, and I've played with Gemini, but I think part of the reason there is that I don't really have a pro version of Gemini at the moment. I also tried with DeepSeek. The limitation that some of them have, and that may be related to how much you pay for them. I think that is a big factor. But the limitation that some of them have that I found was you need to have a concept of a project in order to make life easy for yourself. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in a chat, but both ChatGPT and Claude have this concept of a project. And a project is a place where you can have multiple chats and where you can also, and that is the thing that for me was very important to get to a point that it actually worked, you can add files. And these files, in my experience, are very good to establish a source of the truth, right? Um, did I try LM Studio? I did. Actually, I found out that my laptop is not bad at running local models, but I have not tried to do this work in an offline model. So that would be interesting as an exercise. I have not done that yet. So the problem here is not that you want Claude or ChatGPT to tell something to you. That's easy, right? And the problem is not that you cannot convince these tools to generate code. That's also easy. The problem is, how do you get them to create code that actually makes sense in pdfToolbox? And the basic problem there is that we're not asking them to write general JavaScript. Obviously, we're asking them to generate JavaScript that is going to work in pdfToolbox. And as you probably know, pdfToolbox inserts objects into the JavaScript context. That also, these objects have convenience methods. There's a whole bunch of constants and whatever that you need to use in the proper way in order to set up a configuration or an imposition configuration. And also, you need to make sure that you do things in the right order and so on. And well, apparently there are not enough people on the internet writing imposition configurations and sharing them that this just works. So the AI models haven't had, not very surprising, of course, I'm sarcastic. The AI models have not had enough training data on the internet to understand what pdfToolbox imposition is and how it works. And that's the problem that we have to try and resolve. And I'll tell you how that can work and what I've done. So the first thing I've done here, and what I think is kind of important, this is also where Claude kind of annoyed me today because they changed stuff, is if you go to the help, so help.callassoftware.com, remember we have to teach Claude what we're going to ask it later. And there is, when I go to the manual for pdfToolbox, you have all the chapters here. There is this chapter about imposition, which is the one we're really interested in. And then somewhere here, there is a link where you can say generate PDF. And that is the first thing that I actually did. By the way, there is a new help article. Those of you who are very fast have already seen it. I just wrote that this morning and published it. So JavaScript imposition using LLMs to write imposition scripts. You'll find the same kind of explanation that I'm giving now. You'll find that there, and you'll also find the downloads for the stuff I'm going to talk about here. Yeah. So I went to the documentation and I generated a PDF from the documentation, and then you end up with something that looks like this, which is really interesting and has about 2,000 pages or something like that. And that contains all of the documentation for pdfToolbox. Now, what was very annoying is that I can just take this and put it into my version of ChatGPT that works. When I tried this morning to add this to the files section in Claude, it tells me, yeah, the maximum file size is 30 megabytes. That didn't used to be that way. I guess that is a new restriction. And so what I then did was say, oh, I have pdfToolbox. not a problem. I opened the file. I deleted all the images from the file because it's really the text I'm mostly interested in anyway. And then I used that one. That was a much smaller file. And then it still complained about the file being too big. And that was actually quite annoying. So I deleted everything now except for the imposition chapter, which is good. But if you have a version of Claude where you can have more, where you can have longer files, or you have, in my version of ChatGPT, I don't run into that restriction, and you can just give it the whole document. That is arguably better because there are other parts of the documentation that are interesting. This chapter talks about imposition, and that's the main topic that we want to look at. But imposition can use variables. And so it is very interesting that the AI engine also has the chapter about variables and so on. So I have now just this small documentation file, and that is okay. But if you can give it a little bit more context than just this imposition part, then it would also it would be better in a way. I see a lot of questions about have you done this and that. I will come back to that. Yeah. So for now, I've given it a much smaller version. In ChatGPT, it just has my whole documentation. So that's the first thing, and that is kind of important. The second thing is I built myself a bit of a framework, and maybe we can look at that with Visual Studio Code. So if I look at framework, there is something in there that is called rules. And I saw another question pass by here. As I said a little bit before that, this new help article that I've written has a zip file that is linked to it. And when you download that, you will get all the files that I'm currently looking at. So you do have them. You have them already. So the rules says, what are we trying to do here? What is the AI engine allowed to do? What is it not allowed to do? Some of it you could call preferences almost. I don't like to use var anymore. I prefer let. So there is some imposition related stuff. There is some other stuff, but this kind of gives the engine the general rules about this. I also added a style guide. Yeah. With very interesting things like prefer clarity over cleverness. I prefer being able to read JavaScript. I don't need it to be as short as possible. I need it to be understandable. Yeah. So there are a bunch of, and you can read them once you downloaded this. There are a bunch of conventions here and style indications here that I like to use. You should definitely modify this to fit what you like. So that's rules and style guide. Added to that was are a number of canonical patterns. That's the name ChatGPT came up with. Sorry, but these are examples of how do you use these different parts in the imposition engine. There are also, as you see, some things about variables here already in pdfToolbox. So this tells the engine these are the preferred ways I would like you to use the functionality, JavaScript functionality in pdfToolbox. There is a file that is currently empty and that has clarifications because however much you write in these other documents, you'll see that very often the AI is smart enough to come up with other questions. And so the idea of this clarifications file is that this is something that can grow and that you can re-upload to the project as you go along and you do more. And then there is understanding the user that tells the AI how to interact with you as you are asking questions. Yeah? And that has interesting things also like this here. So if the user is vague, in other words, if I'm chatting in this project and I'm asking something and I sound like I have no clue what I'm talking about, then I'm instructing my AI engine to ask me and not just make assumptions, but to ask me. And somewhere else it says, at least if you're making an assumption, clarify that you've made an assumption and what the assumption was. This comes back a number of times in these documents, and it sounds really stupid. And sometimes it sounds to me like we're trying to educate a toddler, but I think that is exactly what we're doing. And if you don't do this and you don't repeat it a number of times and so on, you're not very strict about it, then this AI is just going to lie to you anyway. And it's going to hallucinate whatever it thinks you want to see. So that has to be very strict. Okay, these framework things here, the idea there is the same as for the documentation. We just add that to the files section. And if it would then do that, that would be nice. There we go. So now it has the documentation and it has the other files that we've added here. The last bit that I added, because that is a very helpful thing for an AI, is I have a number of samples, and these were created together with ChatGPT. So they're not things that I've written in the past and now just give to the AI engine. It's really examples that are meant to cover a lot of the functionality. In the meantime, I will add this to my files section as well. So these are artificial examples that were created specifically for this type of work. And why is that? Well, it would have been so much easier if I could just use a bunch of stuff that I've written already, because I've written quite a few imposition configurations. The problem is when you start looking at them, you find out very, very quickly, it's a very painful process, but you find out very, very quickly that you're not very consistent, right? And that if I look at 5 things that I've written, even though I tend to have a decent level of OCD and I tend to appreciate doing things in the same way over and over and so on, you kind of find out that that really is not the case. And so real world examples, while they may be helpful and it works, they also introduce a level of noise that makes the AI engine think, yeah, but now I don't know what you want, because here you do it one way and there you do it another way. And so if you try to force clarity into this engine, then you should try to avoid giving it too many confusing examples. There's another thing. And that is when you start reading about how AI engines work in predicting content, then there's a couple of guiding principles that they give you. And one of them is that a certain amount of repetition may be helpful, but too much repetition becomes annoying. It becomes unhelpful, actually, because you increase the amount of information that the AI engine has to take into account every time it generates something. It is almost impossible to not introduce some level of confusion if you have too many of the same things. And so it will cost more time, and it will not necessarily give you better results if you would have 5 examples that talk about the same thing. So what we've tried with these examples, and when I say we, I mean ChatGPT and myself, what we've tried with these examples is to have enough coverage of the functionality that pdfToolbox uses, and enough examples, but nothing that overly complicates things or where we could confuse the AI. So they are artificial examples because of that reason. Okay, so we now have a project. Project has a documentation. The project has some examples, and then it has these framework files that tell it what it is doing and how it should be doing it. The next thing that you can do, so if I go to projects, I have this project here. I have a chat now. And the way I then worked with that is I created, let me open it up again in Visual Studio Code. I have two prompts in here. One is a chat prompt and the other one is a project prompt. And we're going to start with the project prompt. There may, in the meantime, be other ways of doing it. I saw that there is now a way to, at the project level, also have instructions. So maybe that is a better way to do it going forward. But this is a project prompt, and the idea is that you issue this prompt once for your project. And because these LLMs are getting better at looking at all of the chats you had in one project, this is kind of a prompt that allows you to prime the project. So I'm going to tell the AI what it is and what I'm expecting from it for all of the conversations I'm going to have in this particular project. And so maybe a few things that are interesting. I'm telling it what these files are that I've given it so that it knows what you expect and what it should do and what it should not do. Oh, by the way, interesting thing here, the rules document contains do and do not. It turns out that telling an AI what not to do is generally not such a smart idea. It's like telling people, do not think of a pink elephant. Yeah, I mean, normal people, so you can decide whether you're normal or not. If you tell a normal person, do not think of a pink elephant, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about a pink elephant. And that is how it works with these AI engines as well. Introducing negative examples has a tendency to cause confusion again. And so the AI may actually do what you don't want it to do simply because you gave a negative example. So just a side note, but what is important in this project prompt here is that I'm telling it that it is a product manager and a software developer. So I'm not only, and that may differ based on what you want to accomplish, but I'm telling it not to just write software for me. That's not its only role, but it should also behave as a product manager, meaning it should think with me about the things that I'm doing. Yeah? Because the ultimate goal is not that it just writes some clever lines of JavaScript. The ultimate goal is that it writes something that actually works, that actually does what I want it to do. And so having this engine also think with me about what should the behavior of imposition be in a normal workflow and how does that normally work, that is actually very helpful. ChatGPT and Claude may not know a lot about how pdfToolbox does imposition, but they know a hell of a lot about how imposition is done because a lot of people have written about that on the internet. So that is knowledge that is generally available. So that's why that sentence is there. And then the other thing, and this is in general very important, is that I'm asking it to make sure that it understood all of the material that I just gave it in this project. And I'm also asking it to ask questions first. So the goal is, instead of already starting to work on something concrete, the goal is that we're in this new project. We're going to tell Claude, and let's do this. God knows what's going to happen now. But that in this new project, we're telling our engine, please make sure that you understand all of these things and ask me questions until all of that is clear. And I know that this works for Claude. I know that it also works for ChatGPT. If you force it to ask questions, explicitly force it to ask questions, you generally get better results in the end, because the natural tendency, the way these things have been programmed, is to just do what you ask and not make your life easier. Because if an AI engine asks too many questions, then some users may say, "Oh, this is difficult. I could just as well do it myself." And that's not what Anthropic or OpenAI wants. They want to keep you happy and using this thing. So you have to force the engine to ask questions. So it has read my material. That is great. It hasn't told me that my material is fantastic. I'm slightly disappointed. So clarifications MD is empty. Very good question. It is indeed empty because this is a file that is there for the future. Could just as well remove it at this point, but it's smart of the AI to ask. And then it asks some questions on things that I have there, and so on. I'm not going to I'm not going to answer all of the questions right now. I just want to show you the general way that this works. But this interaction is actually quite smart. And what I found out by doing this is this is a very good way of figuring out where in the documentation you are missing content, or where in the documentation things may be written that could be confusing to people, because if they confuse the AI, there will probably also confuse a real person, right? So these questions are quite good. I think, yeah, so it asks to confirm some things. There is nothing here that I think is going to cause immediate problems, but you can see that by forcing it to ask questions, that it actually does it. It does it quite well. Yeah. So Christian, that could be most of my experiences with ChatGPT and not Claude. On the ChatGPT side, what I can say from experience is that it's not always good at asking questions. And so this may be a difference between Claude and ChatGPT, which is interesting. But on the ChatGPT side, I know that if I don't force it to ask questions, it very, very often just glances over things and does something to make me happy. It doesn't really make me happy, but that's how it was programmed. Yeah. So this is the first thing that you should do if you follow this method here. This is the first thing that you should do in a project. You should make a new chat, and then you ask Claude to review all of the material and ask any questions. And we should now really answer all of these questions and then teach Claude the things that it was missing. Chances are quite high that if I answer these 6 questions, that it's not going to come back with a bunch of other questions. At least that was my experience. But it could, if you ask it again to make sure that now it has everything out of its system and that works. Maybe it asks more questions, and then I would answer those as well. So that was the first step. We have this chats. We play with Claude or ChatGPT until the moment that it says, good, now I feel confident. That's the danger moment, obviously, when it starts feeling confident. But you guide the AI until that point. And then the next thing is that we now have a real question. And so I have a prompt for this as well. And this mostly reinforces what we've done before and what we've said before, but this is a new chat, so it doesn't, it's not really bad to repeat it. I don't know what it's going to do now because I haven't answered all of its questions. So it may just come up with the same questions. And then I'm explicitly instructing it at this point to only look at, well, to not write code yet, but that the actual instructions to write code are still to follow. By the way, I have set this to some model. I may get better results also if I play with what model I'm using here in ChatGPT. Changing the model from instant to thinking also makes a lot of difference. So yeah, the model selection here is important, and on the ChatGPT side, the selection of the thinking mode is quite important as well. So let's see what it does when I now give it this prompt in a new chat. If I were Claude, I would at this point tell me, if you want me to be sure, then maybe you should ask me questions. So it didn't. It feels supremely confident now. So great. It's a product manager and developer, and now the real thing. And this is now behind my Zoom window here. Let's see if I can move that out of the way a little bit. So what we could now say is a pdfToolbox imposition configuration for a, what do we want to do? Step and repeat with 5 rows, 7 columns. The output sheets should be just big enough to handle the size of this or arbitrary incoming PDF files. And then I'll make it easier. 1 page. So we just want a step and repeat of this 1 page. Normally, again, I would write a lot more. This is a demo, and so I'm not going to make it much more complicated. But we can now, because we primed the project and then answered any questions that that this AI still had, and now we're telling it we have a concrete task. So now we can give it a concrete task, and then we will see what it does. And of course, I've shot myself in the foot now because I've told it very explicitly and a number of times then that I wanted to ask questions and that it shouldn't assume things because that is not good. So now I will at least need to answer its questions. So 1, use the trim box. Again, I'm usually much more verbose with these things. No bleed for this example. And then I am now training it very, very badly, but I know I can get away with it. Again, this is a demo. I'm going to delete this project once we're done. So there should be 5mm of gap. And then margins should be 10mm. Okay, so it asks questions. We're giving it answers, and now let's see what happens. We're still using this Sonnet model. So as is said here, Johannes, quick and cheap. We'll see what it does with this. I think on the ChatGPT side, I would prefer to run it in thinking mode, which also takes a little bit longer, but it's getting quicker and quicker, actually. And so let's see what it does. Okay. It has written quite a bit of stuff for me. Somewhere I say that I like constants so that things can be changed easily. So it has done that. This 0.2 millimeter is a pattern that I've given it. So we can, it has done that correctly. It has found the trim box and so on. Somewhere in my files, it says that it should use effective trim box. So it does that correctly here. Let's see whether it creates an imposition object for me. That is also correct. And then it creates a sheet definition based on the sheet width and height. That's it. And what is the sheet width and height? Based on the trim box. So that is okay. And then it is going to create slots with add slot to the sheet definition. That seems to be okay to me. And then it is going to create a sheet and then add pages to the slots that it just created. So all in all, I'm not entirely certain. So let's see what happens. This is a demo, remember? Usually demos never work. So let me see, do I have one of these stickers here? I think this is a sticker, but it's kind of a weird one. Probably. This is probably a better one. There. This is a 5-page file. Remember that I told Claude that there would be only one page. So again, who knows what happens. And then let's copy paste this in. I don't think that I'm getting any errors. We can do show evaluation results to see what pdfToolbox is going to do. Still doesn't give me any errors, and it actually generates slots and so on. So that looks promising. And then let's just execute this, and there you go. The file size is now 40 centimeter by 24 centimeter. We have 5 rows and 7 columns, so that seems to be okay. I think the 5 millimeter is also okay, and 10 millimeter on the edge. That looks also okay, so there you go. It seems to have created something that is actually quite workable. And then the last part of my experience, and then we can talk if you want, and you can ask questions and so on. But this kind of concludes the demo part. It shows that at least the method that I'm using here works. So the last thing is that when I used this with some of this functionality that ended up in pdfToolbox 17, I actually had bugs in the code. So it gave me workable imposition code, but then this had to do with pattern repetition. It's the algorithm that ChatGPT suggested for repetition was actually buggy, and part of the page was not covered. The nice thing is, of course, that I could now go back to Claude and say, yeah, this is great, but you made a mistake here or there. And I didn't actually point out what the mistake was because I was really not looking forward to try and understand the JavaScript code that it wrote. I just described the symptoms to it, and then it changed the imposition configuration and fixed the problem that way. So you can quite reliably, in the meantime, also do repetitive progress stuff on this. But at least you're not, if you follow this, the chance that you end up with something that is completely hallucinated is a lot lower. Okay, so if you go to help.callassoftware.com again, and you go to the pdfToolbox side, and there to number 30, which is imposition. There is a section here about JavaScript imposition. So all articles about JavaScript imposition. The last article now is this one. using LLMs to write imposition scripts. And then I have some explanations similar to what I talked about now. And the interesting bit, of course, is that you have this project material folder that is the same folder as what I have here. And then, but only with the small documentation file. You can still generate a full documentation file. Just if you remember, go to the bottom of the list of articles and you can download the PDF file there. Someone apparently already did that today. Very good. And then what you also have here is all of these prompts and then the framework files and the examples that I've used here as well. So all of that stuff is downloadable and is available if you want it, and then you can try the same. You can try to use the same way that I've tried using it. What you should also do is don't be lazy now. You should go, especially into this framework folder, have a look at what it says under rules and style guides. There may be things that you would like in a different way than the way I like them. The things that I have in here are the way I prefer the engine to do things. I could actually see that this is probably things that will change over time as well. And a little hint, this looks like a lot of information and a lot of work to generate all of these files. Of course, the majority of these files, I did it iteratively as well. I came up with something in terms of prompts, and then I taught ChatGPT how I liked to do things. And then I had ChatGPT help me in writing these files. And the cool thing was I asked ChatGPT, give me prompts and so on. So I asked ChatGPT, give me prompts and so on to set this up so that this can be properly done. And then I gave Claude, I created a project in Claude and gave it all these files that ChatGPT created. And then I asked a question, and then I gave the answer of Claude back to ChatGPT and said, look, this is what your colleague has done. So what do you think of this, and how can we improve the documents for this framework so that Claude knows how to do a better job? And that was actually very, very interesting and a very quick way of doing it. And so it probably took me, I don't know, half a day to set this up to such an extent that I always got very clear answers and code from Claude. And also it took a while, so that if I gave it this project prompt where I'm explicitly telling it to ask questions and so on, the first time I ran this, I probably got 15 or 20 or 30 questions from Claude with things that were missing and not good, not understood, or vague. And so we iterated these documents to make sure that when I create a new project or a new chat now, it is content quite quickly because it has a lot of this information. It doesn't have a lot of doubts anymore. So that was very, very helpful. Just don't write all of these things manually. Same for these examples. If you want to add examples of specific things, or you have specific patterns that you would like it to follow, then give those things to an LLM, explain what you're going to do with this example, maybe give it all of the other examples that I have in here, and ask it to massage the new things that you give it so that it fits nicely in with all of the other examples. Yeah. Or give this whole folder to Claude and say, oh, this was generated by David. He doesn't know how to write JavaScript, and I don't like this and this and this. Could you please refactor these examples so that this bad behavior isn't in there anymore? Yeah? But don't just use what I've created here. Have a look at what is in there, and then make sure that you clean up these things and customize them until they until they fit. Yeah, that that would work. Okay, so questions. If you have questions, please please ask. So can Claude and can you ask Claude to do more complex things? Yes, of course. It really understands a lot of things. It probably knows more about imposition than I do, which granted is not that difficult. But you can definitely ask it things like, this is the size I have. Could you now look at the incoming document and do a fill page? Or some more special imposition setup that you need for a particular case. That absolutely works, and it's also things that I've asked it to do. Have I created a call it cut with this model for a multi-page job? I have done things with multi-page jobs for sure. I've used it for, I think this is something that you will recognize also, but I've used it for the book cover imposition stuff with a variable cover also. If the model, if Claude or ChatGPT knows what you mean with this unique collate cuts, then I'm confident it can generate it. If it doesn't know it because it's common enough knowledge on the internet, then it may be that you have to give it or write it some documentation on how exactly the positioning of the pages should be on the on the sheet. Yeah, but normally front and back stuff and so on, I've tried that. That's not a problem in general. The only thing that I could potentially see as a problem is if you're asking it to generate an imposition configuration for something that it does not understand. Yeah. Yeah, let's say that you're asking for something that is work and turn and it doesn't understand that expression, which is a bad example. I'm pretty sure it will understand it. There's again enough stuff about it on the internet. But if you ask it for something that it doesn't understand, then hopefully after these prompts, it will be smart enough to come back to you and say, you're going to have to explain to me what exactly it is that you want. Yeah. What I think, but what I have not tried is at least on the ChatGPT side, and keep in mind that most of my practical example or practical experiences with ChatGPT, at least on the ChatGPT side, it seems to become better and better in interpreting images. So I'm pretty sure if you would give it an image and you would tell it, look, here you have an image of the front of a sheet, and here you have an image of the back of the sheet, and you have page numbers on there, pages with page numbers, I'm actually pretty confident that it can look at these images and say, okay, so I can generate an imposition configuration that will follow the same page order. And then again, you may need to clarify with some additional restrictions and so on. But in general, it works pretty well. Yeah. By the way, this irregular nesting, I'm not sure what you mean with that, Andy. What I have tried is to do something that does, I guess we would call it ganging of, or not, sheet optimization of jobs. So I have a one-page file coming in, and I want to place that one page on a sheet of a certain size as efficiently as possible, and I can also rotate it 90 degrees as I want. And that works quite well. It took a little bit of time because the algorithm is far from easy. Even for simple cases, it is far from easy. But I managed to make something that worked quite well in a relatively short amount of time. And then, of course, because you're using an LLM anyway, my next question then was, can you now give me something where I also have, you also give me a page with lines on it where this thing needs to be cut, so cutting instructions, and then number them in the way that they would need to be cut by a guillotine device that worked also quite well. Yeah, so what you're saying, Christian, about Claude, I think I have the same experience. If you generate something and then you give it a screenshot, especially if you would have a document, test document that has page numbers on it, so you can just make a screenshot of the imposition that you're getting and then tell Claude or ChatGPT, look, this isn't correct, or the front, if you print this, the front page will not match the back page for whatever reason. If you give it instructions like that, it is really capable of looking at images and then deriving from there what it did wrong and then correcting the imposition configuration. Okay, very long question. So how repeatable? Yes. Yeah, that is so is it always perfectly repeatable? No. ChatGPT and Claude are partly chaotic. That is built into the algorithm because otherwise you get very bad results. That's unfortunately how it works. I think humans operate that way as well, to some extent at least. So it's not entirely repeatable. In fact, because I wanted to make sure that this was going to work. So what I did this morning was the same thing I did now. I went to Claude, deleted everything that was not relevant, made a new project, and went through the whole procedure that I went through now with you. And I can't give you any details, but I can tell you that I didn't get 6 questions from Claude with my project prompt, but only 5. 3 of the questions are the same than the ones that you saw now, but it actually now asked a question I have not seen this morning. Yeah, and another question was definitely framed differently. So it is repeatable to some extent, and you're increasing the repeatability by giving it a tighter harness to work inside, but it's not a 100% deterministic engine, and you're always going to see that. So are you going to get exactly the same script next week? Probably not. Do I expect that you get a significantly similar script that functionally does the same? Yeah, I actually do think that. So the fact that it's not entirely deterministic is one reason that you may get a different script. The other reason is the other thing I said already. These things change so quickly from day to day that I don't know whether the Claude engine you're running next week is the same as the Claude engine you're running this week, and what is different. And so these things may make a lot of difference also. By the way, as I said, I tried this with some other engines as well. I'm discounting Gemini because I don't have a payable account and I didn't want to invest the time to figure out how to get it going. It was very lazy of me, but I couldn't be bothered. I did try a little bit more with DeepSeek because I'm also interested in keeping an eye on what happens on the Chinese side of the world. I think we do that not enough, let's put it that way. So I also looked at DeepSeek and what that did. The big restriction I ran in when I did that, but this is a month ago and things may have changed since then. But the big difference the big problem that I had was that DeepSeek at that point had no concept of a project, same way that Claude and ChatGPT have it, and that its processing content did not do well with my very long documentation file that I had at the time. And then I kind of gave up. Yeah, I think with the approach that I now used with the small documentation file, I should actually try it again, and the chances that it behaves significantly better. How do I handle context? Well, that's the projects, right? So normally, if you put something in a project, when the engine runs and is chatting with you, this context is checked. Yeah? And you can see that in Claude. You can indeed see what Claude is thinking about, which is very interesting. Same on the ChatGPT side, very interesting. And you can really see it go to state what it has to do, and then say, oh, I should look at this in the documentation and make sure I have the right setup here, and then reading part of the documentation and go back to reasoning and then reading the documentation again. So it really uses updated versions of this this context. It could be that there are better ways to integrate it into Claude. I don't know the particular setup in Claude well enough, and I'm not even sure I know the setup in ChatGPT large enough. Do I think that this is something that could be integrated into pdfToolbox? Yeah, maybe. The question is, do you want it to be integrated into pdfToolbox? And I've maybe changed my mind a little bit about that. At least for now, if you want the best performance, or and I mean performance not so much as in speed, because I couldn't care less, but in terms of results, right? If you want the best results, then you're, I think, today kind of forced to use the edge models like ChatGPT and Claude. And you can run a bunch of stuff locally, but in general, I don't think that's a good idea. You can get better results with the online models. So of course, we could integrate something like that into pdfToolbox. I'm interested to know whether people would think that that would be interesting. But even if we do that, keep in mind that a lot of these framework files that I added here reflect my personal preferences rather than what I think should always happen. So we could, if we integrate this in pdfToolbox in a way, inject some generic content that, like documentation and so on, that we could do for sure. But there are also always going to remain files that are more preference, and where I would expect that you want to have control over it. So I'm not sure at this point. I find it an interesting idea to integrate it into pdfToolbox, but I'm not sure that that is the right way to do yet, and whether we are already there. Yeah. Yeah. The comment about I created imposition scripts and then it took a while before I understood what I wanted. I think this is really, really key. These engines are really good to do something, but if you don't know what you want, it's going to fail. So you need to really understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and you need to be able to tell the engine in a structured way what it is. And so I think on the hallucination side and so on, this framework that I developed here and that I shared with you here can help a lot. So it will help ChatGPT or Claude to write better code that is usable within pdfToolbox. As you saw, we didn't have to change anything. I just did copy paste and it worked in pdfToolbox. Does that mean it behaves exactly the way that I want? No, of course not. If I make a mistake in what I ask, if I haven't understood something correctly, then the LLM is not going to automatically fix it for me. If you're lucky, you suggest something, you ask it to do something, and it comes back and says, wait a minute, are you sure? Because your instructions seem to be not very logical or something like that. It probably will not say that, because you can't say a human that it's not you can't tell a human that it's not logical, right? That's not how this thing is programmed. So, but it may actually spot some of these things and ask you questions. I think the main purpose of this framework is to reduce hallucination and give you a place where at least the code that it generates is correct. It's up to you to make sure that the use case is correct as well. Um, yeah, this thing where it finds its own problems is is very common. It's also very interesting to do something with ChatGPT and give it to Claude and ask to comment and vice versa, and they dislike each other, I think. But often they also dislike themselves. Yeah, it's generally not a bad idea. But that's not a code thing even. I also do it for text. When I ask it to write a text for me, I very often get to the point that I'm happy with it. And then I take the same text, paste it in the chat again, and ask ChatGPT, now could you please look at this text and tell me what I have been missing and what the potential dangers are, what is not good about this, and so on. So you can ask it to critique its own work, and it's actually quite good at it. Yeah, so the comments about the temperature thing, yes, absolutely. That's also what I meant, of course. So the randomness isn't specific to Claude or ChatGPT. It's a feature of how this LLM thing works, and you can use it to create more randomness or less. I have not done that yet. I have read about it and heard people who are supposed to know what they're talking about talk about it. And what I remember from that is that it's not very easy to find out what the exact randomness or temperature version should be. And so I have stayed away from that. I'm at this point not enough of an expert to start wasting my time on this. I was much happier to give it a nice harness that keeps it in line with what it does. What you can do, and that is something I have experienced or worked with. What you can do is ask it to think out of the box. Yeah, so usually what you get back in terms of answers is kind of in the middle of the probability curve, and you can, through prompting, also tell the engine, yeah, this is great, this is the standard stuff, but now could you please give me a couple of suggestions that are not in the median distribution, but that are a little bit outside of the norm. And it actually can do that. At least I've done the experiment with ChatGPT, and that was quite interesting. I was doing that for marketing and ways on writing marketing for a product, and so you could, in very interesting ways, push it out of the norm until it generated marketing messages where it's itself said, "This is not something that humans probably would do, but it may still work, and it's a little bit outside." And it became very, very interesting very quickly. So yeah, you could play with temperature, but you can also have a lot of this variability by prompting it in the correct way. I have not worked with Claude Cowork. I know it can do those things, but that's something that I haven't played with. There's so many things to play with these tools that you have to pick your battles. I think my next experiment will be with Claude Design, because that is one of my how do you call it, handicaps, if you will, is that I'm not a very competent visual designer, and that's a very, very nice way of putting it. And I'm hoping that Claude Design may actually be able to cure some of that incompetence. So that's my next project. And then the comment about the big file, yes. So my experience with ChatGPT is also that it accepted it without any problem. I don't know, and I did it with Claude in the past as well. So I don't know whether this file restriction is new in Claude. Maybe it's because I have a pro version. The pro version, they think that I don't pay enough money for that. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So your experience may vary there. Very cool. It's 5:10 now, so that's about what I expected that would happen. A few questions. If there are any other questions, feel free to ask. If not, I think that is what I wanted to share. So I would say go check out these files that I put in help.callassoftware.com. Play with it. Okay, the price for these files and the price for the work I've done on it is that if you find something interesting, please share it back with me, and then I can evolve the things that we share with you. And so let's make sure that we all learn from these things, right? So if you play with this and you find interesting stuff, please share, and I will be very interested to learn more. My next project, by the way, that I want to do, other than the design question, is you in pdfToolbox also have this place content stuff that uses HTML templates. Yeah, sushi is also good. I want to use this. I want to do the same exercise with place content and see if we can reliably build place content templates with an LLM. Yeah. And that should work because it's again HTML and JavaScript and CSS, and then some custom behavior that pdfToolbox has. So I think if I give it the right portions of the documentation and some guidance, we should be able to make that work as well. If I get to the point that I have something that I can share, then I will do so again, and then I will probably set up a similar session to this so that I can talk to you. Thanks to all of you for joining. That's a lot more people than I thought would join, actually. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to send me email. If I make advances here, then I will share with you. And that's it. This was fun. Let's do it again. Have a great day.